Hey guys, it's CS Joseph with csjoseph.life doing another episode for season 19. This is episode 11, how to cognitively develop or how to reach enlightenment or how to be your best self or the personal growth path or how to reach cognitive integration for ISTPs, aka the artificer, aka the craftsman type. And I was actually asked recently on Facebook what my most favorite of the 16 types was, or at least if I was going to be any of the 116 types, which of the 16 would I be? And I absolutely picked the ISTP, even though deep down my actual favorite type is the type that I actually am. I prefer ENTP above all of them. And it's funny because when I initially researched the MBTI and Jungian analytical psychology years ago, I actually had zero desire to be an ENTP. I thought ENTPs were manipulative AF. I thought they were extremely selfish and depraved and liars, quite frankly. And it's come to the and then like within that story, as I was with my ESTP mentor, who still to this day thinks he's an ISTP, interestingly enough, uh, I came to the realization that I was actually, in fact, an ENTP after my other mentor, my INFJ mentor, proved to me that I was an extrovert, which basically shattered my world, and I had to come to a different place mentally when dealing with that. And I'll admit that was pretty hard for me. It was hard for me to get to that point. And honestly, I just wasn't really sure. Well, I know I wasn't ready to have that experience. But furthermore, I'm not exactly sure. That's the right experience for everyone to have. Uh, when you take an online test, it's only 1 out of 5 accurate, and that could be a serious problem. And quite honestly, I I wish it was so much easier, or more accurate to actually be able to take a test and get an accurate result, but that was not the case. But yeah, as as an ENTP or someone who used to think they were an INTJ or an INFJ who's actually really an ENTP, it's a very humbling experience. But I wouldn't trade it for the world. I wouldn't trade my type for the world. I like being ENTP. ENTP is my personal favorite, and it is who I am, and I'm very thankful for that. But if ENTPs didn't exist, I definitely prefer to be ISTP. Let's be honest. And I I really like ISTPs. They are amazing. They're fun. I've also the one man that I respect most in life is an ISTP actually, and that's my cousin. When I was homeless, he gave me some work and he made sure that I was fed and he helped me out. And he's a good man. His whole family is of good people. Even his ESTP brother, who arguably hates my guts, but I still hold a lot of love and respect for his ESTP brother because ESTP brother gave me skills like fishing and the like. And Mike also gave me a lot of skills and lessons like personal responsibility, um, and like he taught me personal responsibility. He taught me a lot. And ISTPs, they're these amazing teachers with their ENFJ subconscious, and they also give so much on a regular basis. And honestly, they do not receive enough credit or recognition for what they do on a regular basis. But they are not without their flaws. And like all of the 16 types, they need to be in a situation or in a position to be able to, improve themselves. So, but anyway, what is the purpose of the ISTP? Uh, it's really hard for most people. The ISTP is the typical jack of all trades, master of none situation. They're also the typical type that can learn and master a skill through teaching that skill. It's not, and I think that's basically their purpose in life is learning through teaching. They have to teach somebody in order to truly master something, in order to truly learn it, because they are jack of all trades, masters of none, but they can only engage with or become a master as a result of becoming someone's master and taking on an apprentice and teaching it to other people. And that's no different than my cousin. He owns an HVAC company, very successful in Washington State, and multi-millionaire setup, a fantastic fellow. And his skills in HVAC and the trade became extremely good, but only after he started hiring people and teaching them what to do and scaling up his company and his business, taking people on, teaching them, mentoring them, and being a mentor is absolutely what he is about. So ISTPs, their purpose in life is basically mentorship for the purpose of achieving self-mastery. The more they mentor, the more they master. And that's basically their main purpose in life. And I had the honor of having plenty of ISTPs in my life who made the decision to mentor me. And I don't know if they took pity on me, but they were being very empathetic towards me and my situation, especially since I was an absolute loser. I mean, I tell you the truth, before I was 27 years old, I was not even a man. I was a horrible man child. And I regret how much of a man child I was. And it wasn't until the ISTPs in my life that I was able to stop being a man child, quite frankly. And according to socionics, the ENTP ISTP relationship is known as the supervisor relationship. And the supervisor relationship, I think, is very poignant. I'm actually going to be doing some lectures about each of the individual socionics relationships that each type has. We're going to be doing, I'm going to talk about camaraderie and how important it is. And then I'm actually going to break down each potential relationship according to socionics and how socionics explains that interaction, etc., in a future lecture series. And I believe that will be made publicly available on YouTube when I do that series in the very near future. I think that might be season 23 and 24, actually. But most of my seasonal content's probably not going to be coming out publicly available, so that might also end up being additional Patreon related lectures. I think after season 19, I'm going to be doing 2 seasons at the same time for Patreon, so we'll see where that goes. But anyway, that's their purpose in life. Their temperament is known as the SP temperament, aka the artisan temperament. They're the temperament that's focused on freedom. They're also the temperament that's very tribal, very nomadic, very Genghis Khan, etc. All about pragmatism. Independence is king. We don't care about doing the right thing as much as we care about doing what works for the sake of independence. They're also very interest-based. ISTPs are all about what they can get out of a situation versus what other people can get out of a situation. And it's kind of interesting because I actually had an ISTP recently contact one of my friends, and he contacted one of my friends and was like, yo, you got to watch out for that Chase guy. He seems like he's always on the take or whatever, and what is he getting out of the situation for helping us with our business, etc. And my friend told this ISTP to his face, I'm like, I've known Chase for 3 years and he has never taken anything from me this entire time. So I don't know what your issue is. And that's because, that's an example of a systematic ENTJ clashing with an interest-based ISTP in that standpoint, because ISTPs, STPs in general, but mostly ISTPs with SE parent, have a really hard time comprehending that somebody could be just giving something for the sake of giving something. And it's usually because ISTPs, through their FE inferior, can end up giving to get often. The risk of covert contracting through their ENFJ subconscious definitely exists. Or they've also dealt with seeing other people consistently getting screwed over because someone gives to them and then they expect to receive something in return. And there's this hidden expectation there, this hidden desire, this hidden agenda, which their NE trickster is just not aware of. So they automatically end up jumping to conclusions, the wrong conclusions, because of their NE trickster. and then can assume that somebody's on the take when the reality situation is that they're not. This is especially worse in extrovert intuition critic when it comes to an ENFJ and an ENTJ as well. So it's kind of interesting watching the pot call the kettle black between this ENTJ and this ISTP actually communicating together. I found that very interesting. So their communication style is direct responding movement. They see things to the end. They're finisher types. They have a hard time starting things, but once they get started, they are all about finishing all the way through the end, and they're pretty amazing. I know some very good, capable ISTP entrepreneurs in the freeze drying business, in the music amplifier business, or any music equipment, creation of equipment, for example. Vehicle creation, skateboards, bicycles, the like. ISTPs are amazing in that area. Survival gear. I think Bear Grylls himself is an ISTP. Joe Robinett, if you guys know who Joe Robinett is on YouTube, he's an ISTP, and he does the like I watched like an hour-long video of him on YouTube where he recorded himself only taking 4 things with him into the snowy forest and built himself a shelter and stayed there like all night and filmed the entire time, which was pretty cool of him. Too bad his dog Scout was not with him, but and he said the reason why he's doing it is he's perfecting the craft, because that's what craftsmen do, perfecting his craft of survivalism so that he can take care of his family in case there's an emergency situation. But if you notice, he's actually doing the purpose of his life. The purpose of his life is reaching mastery through mentorship. He's mentoring his YouTube viewers on his videos how to survive, and in doing so, he's learning additional techniques on how to survive with his NI child. His NI child is literally creating new opportunities for him in the forest. It's just magical to watch how NI child works and how NI child can just get through every bad obstacle that it encounters, and it's insanely tactical. Very powerful to watch ISTPs just get through literally anything. You know, it's kind of like you're watching the return of Jafar, and then someone telling the genie, the evil genie Jafar, hey, you can't kill me, genies can't kill. And then Jafar's response is, yeah, but you'd be surprised what you can live through. It's like, yeah, okay, that's so ISTP, because ISTPs can ultimately live through anything. It's because their SI critic just lets them have that super wise endurance, perseverance, and combined with their NI child, has this like insane knack for luck, or liquid luck. They could just kind of get through anything, which is pretty amazing. But ISTPs are not without their flaws. So anyway, they're an artisan and they are a finisher. So the artisan finisher is the ISTP. That's how you find them on the type grid. Their quadra is Templar, so they are Templar type. Templars are all about wielding the fiery sword of truth, holding people accountable, building up good character in others while simultaneously maintaining their own character, and if they don't, then they're becoming hypocritical. We're actually going to be discussing a lot of the ISTP's hypocrisy in this lecture when it comes to control, because quite honestly, as much as people think ENTJs are the most controlling of the types, I could actually make an argument that the ISTP is the most controlling of all the types. And I maintain this is definitely a risk that a lot of people are completely unaware of. But we're going to actually dive in as to exactly how that is. And their virtue and vice. Their virtue and vice is joy versus melancholy. And no one can experience joy or fun better than an ISTP can. This is why the ISTP is the one jumping out of airplanes. They're the ones at Crankworks in Whistler, Canada, doing the mountain biking thing. They're like the Tony Hawk skateboarding thing. They're doing Tour de France and like all sorts of different things. As a result, things that put themselves at risk. An ISTP recently invented a new gun. I also saw that they invented the same flight system that Iron Man uses. I saw a different car design that seemed pretty cool. An ISTP put like some really insane hydraulics on a car and raised it way up, and then actually was able to use those hydraulics to like go over other cars in traffic, basically, to get through everything. I thought that was incredible. Very risky, because what if those other cars start moving and it knocks it over, and then all of a sudden that car crashes on top of that other vehicle? But you see those videos on LinkedIn from Cheddar, etc. That's basically like ISTP heaven of all the cool stuff, that cool technologies that they're creating on a regular basis and what they're crafting. So, but yeah, but still, this is ultimately the path to enlightenment, or the path to become the best ISTP that you could be within this particular lecture. And obviously, why do you need to reach enlightenment? The reason why is because the four sides of the mind are disjointed. You have your ego, you have your subconscious, you have your unconscious, you have your superego. Actually, I'm going to give you guys a look at the whiteboard here. But there's the four sides of the mind. The gateways are the hero function, the inferior function, also known as the infant, the villain ally function, and then the demon function. Those are the four gateways. And you have four sides of the mind, and early in life, your four sides of the mind are disjointed, they're disintegrated, and life's purpose is basically for you to experience a lot of pain of life, to gain the wisdom or the know-how necessary to integrate all of your mind together so that you can live more harmoniously and ultimately reach enlightenment, which is basically cognitive integration, where all four sides of your mind are integrated together, and you are finally basically at peace within yourself because you know who you are, you know your identity, you know all of your strengths and weaknesses, and you're developing the best parts of your soul. The superego itself is superfluous. It's a second ego that's attached to your mind, and it's trying to replace itself with your ego. And this is what causes the human condition. It's also what causes a human being to do the expedient versus the meaningful. And all SPs struggle with instant gratification. I'd say ISTPs probably struggle with instant gratification the least of the four artisan types, but it is still a problem for them. And that instant gratification can get them into serious trouble, especially when they combine it with NE trickster, because like an ISTP can find themselves in an extremely dangerous situation that they had no idea was even going to happen to them. But their NI child and their SE parent is so tactical that they can get out of that situation just as quickly as they got into it and unobligate themselves or protect themselves with very little damage sustained, which is kind of interesting because they still have, potentially a hard time starting things because they're a finisher type, starting new things that they've never done themselves or seen other people do, basically, and that can usually inhibit them from making all of that work. So anyway, the point is, they all have a growth track like the rest of us, and and the superego has no real respect for the ego. That's why it's very demonic, even though it could be an angelic force. And the whole point behind cognitive integration is to just take your superego and turn it into an angelic force instead of a demonic force. A demonic force for evil, turn it into an angelic force for good that everybody can benefit from. An INFP superego can basically craft the ultimate utopia or the ultimate future, and the ISTP could do that, and it's basically for the rest of humanity. Basically, that is the ISTP's gift to the world. An ISTP could literally be the one to bring about an ideal future for the human race, where like the society within Star Trek becomes reality, for example. And it's interesting, like ISTPs do not often concern themselves with the greater what if. They do not concern themselves with what is possible. They only really concern themselves with what is right in front of them at that point in time. But as they get older and as they reach mastery through mentorship, they start to see a pattern in reality. And that pattern, they realize that there is something more, there's something different. They spend so much time gaining mastery over reality that once they've achieved it, like, well, there's got to be more than this. And then they know there is. Intuitively, their child knows that there is something else that their trickster just can't see. And their entire life is to be able to find out what that is and reach mastery of the metaphysical of some kind, or at least see the metaphysical from a mechanical point of view that is seen through SE parent. And they're trying to see if they can map that trickster function to get information coming to their SE parent so they could take the metaphysical and turn it and transmute it into the physical, basically. But in order to do that, they have to integrate their minds, which is hard to do because our INFP superego thinks that their ego is irresponsible. It thinks that it's subconscious, that the subconscious side of the mind is basically it's prideful and arrogant, and it sees the shadow or the unconscious side of the mind as foolish. And it has these three labels that it's judging the rest of the mind with, and it's just refusing to be integrated. And sometimes, ISTPs with their instant gratification, instead of actually spending the appropriate time and earning their way to integration, earning their way to enlightenment, basically, they like to do the quick route and just go right into the superego and utilize the superego's principles as well as the superego's mastery over the metaphysical for their own personal gain, basically, which can lead to insanely high amounts of binging and debauchery without consequences to their actions whatsoever, regardless of who may suffer, which could be a serious problem. I don't know how many times I've seen ISTPs think it's okay that, hey, I know I'm married, but what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. That's like a demonic principle from their INFP superego. So they think that it's okay that, hey, if I'm just going to Vegas, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. That means I can get two twin hookers and then snort cocaine off their ass and then screw them immediately afterwards, and even though I'm married. And I've known ISTPs who do that at least once a year, and they think it's okay to go ahead and enjoy the pleasurable company of a whore because no one's going to know about it. And hey, because no one's going to know about it, I can get away with it. And their inner child's like, ooh, yay, fun. And it's the same thing for it's also the same for spending money, or wasting, or scrounging up that money and losing at the slot machines, etc. Although, quite frankly, I've noticed ISTPs are more, they don't really like being those slot monkeys just pressing the button hoping like ISFPs necessarily would. They like to lose their money on the roulette table, let's be honest, because NI Child's all about that luck, you know what I'm saying? And putting it all on red or putting it all on black is a really big deal, right? So that's kind of their main approach with it, always having those 50-50 chances and just riding dirty or riding all the way through on the edge, basically, because no one is more of an edgelord than an ISTP if you think about it. And I'm not even kidding. ISTPs actually have the reputation for being the absolute creepiest of all the types. They have some serious surveillance issues, and we'll talk about that as to why that happens very shortly here. So anyway, in order to reach cognitive integration, you have to utilize your gateway functions. You do it in an orderly manner or a chaotic manner. The younger they are, the more predisposed to doing it in a chaotic manner. Kind of like when you take a bottle of water and you're pouring the huge bottle of water out into a water bottle of some kind, and it's just going, and it's just shaking all over, and the water's getting everywhere because it's coming out not controlled. But if you take that water bottle and slowly, carefully get the water out of the water bottle, and let enough air come in, and it's just a nice, smooth stream of water coming out instead of going ka-thunk, ka-thunk, ka-thunk constantly. That's a more order transition. So consider the fourth side of the mind like a farm with 4 plots of land, and irrigation is where the water is, and all the water is in the ego crop. You open up the other irrigation gateways. You can open up all at one time, and all that water just pours in, and just be like, oh, it's a huge rush. Or it can be opened slowly, and then some of that water could slowly stream out over time, etc. That is something to be aware of. And that's basically the best example of cognitive transition, or at least, the development of the gateways that I could show you. It's either just barging through gateways, going in through it head on and headstrong, or carefully going through the gateways in a controlled, self-control, disciplined manner, holding that water bottle in it carefully, basically. So that kind of explains how the path to enlightenment works. So right now, let's talk about each of the 4 sides of the mind and how one would develop for each individual of the 4 sides in order to unlock their superego and gain that angelic power, instead of having and do the meaningful thing instead of doing the expedient thing and making a deal with the devil itself, the demon within, basically. So ISTPs, the first gateway is logic, aka TI hero. And TI hero is very interesting because TI hero could be very arrogant. It can also be very stubborn. And sometimes ISTPs are at risk of, when it comes to their TI, they take on preferred input, meaning truths or facts that they like to hear about instead of things that they don't want to hear about, per se. And this basically creates, and they only surround themselves with people who think the same way that they think, which can create an echo chamber. And then, or they just decide to not take in any new input whatsoever, and rely on just their own thinking, which causes them to have incorrect logical chains because the base of their logic is fundamentally flawed, and then they start cannibalizing on their own thinking because they're not receiving new input from others. So that's basically a form of last known input. So TI hero, because it's a hero, I mean every hero has a little bit of the demon in it. The hero is basically just a souped up parent function with additional powers that's derived from the demon basically, or the nemesis, etc. But that's like, so think about it, the hero basically equals parent plus nemesis essentially. So it's an issue, and because of that, they end up having they rely on last known input, or they rely on preferred input, and that creates ignorance. Basically, it creates this way where the TI hero, it just becomes arrogant and stubborn with what it knows. And this is one of the reasons why I say ISTPs, they think they know best, and it's really hard to prove them wrong. And when you do, sometimes they don't always take responsibility for it. Because at the end of the day, their child is just like, well, it's my freedom of choice anyway, and I get to choose to be ignorant. I get to choose to make the wrong decisions if I want to. I get to choose to go to the bar and be debauched. I get to choose to go, have a hooker anytime I want. I could do whatever I want, because that's how ISTPs are, regardless of the consequences that other people have. And that's the thing about SPs that really bothers me, is that artisan types really don't actually know the consequences to their actions. And then they expect everybody else to know the consequences of their actions, but they themselves don't often know the consequences of their own actions. And this is especially problematic with ISTPs because NI child is extremely childish. And it's like, okay, whatever you want, chief, they'll tell you, and then like, but I'm still going to do whatever I want anyway. And they just don't care, and they don't listen, and their freedom of choice is more important than your personal safety. It's more important than your good. It's more important, it is more important. Their freedom of choice is more important than you or any other human being, and that's just how it is. And that's how most ISTPs start out. Only the wiser ones, the responsible ones, the humble ones realize that their freedom of choice, if their child is allowed to reign free upon the world, it will basically create a bad experience in other people. And the hero function is the first gateway you go to. And when an ISTP is developing as a child, the first function that develops is the hero, followed by the inner child. It's not the parent function like everyone else thinks. No, the auxiliary function is the last function to develop in the ego. Why is that? Because the parent function is where a person's sense of personal responsibility comes from. And because that's their sense of personal responsibility, it would make sense that when you're maturing as an adult, that would be the last thing you learn, right? And it's so funny because ISTPs get so hypocritical because they're like, hey, everyone else needs to be responsible, but they're not willing to take responsibility themselves. It's really frustrating. So their child function develops next. Then it's the inferior function, actually, because the hero function would have been developed, but the hero function and the child function are in this cognitive loop, hanging out with each other and basically bypassing the parent because there's no parent in the family taking over. And because there's no parent in the family, the child and the hero get to run around and be like, hey, I think I want to do this. 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 It's true that I want to do this. It's true that I want to do that. I want to do this. This is true. I want to do that. And they just literally live in this endless loop of debauchery. They live in this endless loop of, what can I get out of the situation? And then they like to think that they're so caring and going for everyone else, but really at the bottom line at the end of the day is like they're really selfish with their freedom of choice. It's really frustrating. It's extremely frustrating. And it's not until their parent function is developed that they actually learn that that's not the case. Because eventually the ISTP is going to see that they are completely and utterly alone. Now, some ISTPs are fine with being completely and utterly alone, but some of them are not. And the thing is because they're not going to reach fulfillment. They'll hit midlife crisis because they haven't mastered any skills, because they haven't mentored anyone. But they realize they can't mentor anyone because no one wants to have anything to do with them. Because they're so alienating. Because they're like this big time know-it-all. Because they put their personal freedom of choice over everybody else's freedom. because they're so interest-based. They're like, my choice, my this, my that. They're extremely selfish about it, and they do not allow other people to have freedom of choice. So instead, the ISTP is like, hey, I get freedom of choice, and I'm just going to obligate all of you people. And you're just going to have to get over it because it's my choice. We're like, okay, yeah, I'm going to make you think that you have freedom. I'm going to make you think, but you're really just obligated. I'm just still going to do whatever I want. And it's like, okay, wow, that's effective, ISTPs. Thank you very much for putting everyone else at risk. Because that's what happens when SE parent is underdeveloped. The ISTP, whenever they make decisions to do just whatever they want, they literally put everyone else around them at risk. One person's uncontrolled willpower creates extroverted sensing risks for other people. It destroys the safety of others. When you're exerting your will in a situation in a selfish manner, you are making it unsafe, automatically unsafe for other people. You are causing risks to other people. It's kind of like you're flying an airplane and you still haven't figured out flying an airplane, but you're deciding, I'm going to do the expedient thing and start flying the airplane, and I'll just learn how to fly it, and then all of a sudden you crash into someone's house when you should have just actually been patient and done all the training. So that's the thing about ISTPs. They have to learn patience, but then that NI child is just going to get in there and it's just not going to work. So SE parent starts to realize that there are actually some consequences and potential damage that they could actually do to other people and make other people uncomfortable if they allow their inner child to just do whatever it wants. So the SE parent has to get in and provide temperance and temper that child. Spank that child, that SE child, because or that SE parent spank that NI child, so that NI child is disciplined and not just allowing itself to be impulsive and do whatever it wants all the time. But the SE parent gets tired of that, so the SE parent has to make decisions. Hey, I got to do it when it matters and pick those battles. Otherwise, the NI child is just going to be able to run freely every now and then, which can also be a problem. So how do they deal with this? Really, it comes down to is taking full responsibility for their actions. When they're going after other people and seeing what other people are doing, they need to be learning from other people's mistakes. And instead of just like making this decision of, I want to do this just to see what happens, I am going to have sex with that person even though I know they're in another relationship with somebody else, but I just want to see what happens. What are the consequences going to be? It's as if someone's trying to tell, they've already heard the conventional wisdom on the subject of what's going to happen when they have sex with that person. They're literally the other man or the other woman in the relationship. The ISTP is cheating, and they're just using the other person for sex at that moment, and it doesn't really matter to them whatsoever. They don't care. They have FI demon. Who cares, right? We're just having sex, right? Because ISTPs and artisan types in general, but especially STPs, especially ISTPs. ISTPs are the absolute worst of the types for casual sex. And you'd think that like an ESTP is worse. No, it's not, because at least they have NI inferior. It's actually NI child within an ISTP that is the worst of all the types when it comes to casual sex. And yeah, I get that ESTPs have a huge nymphomania problem, but an ISTP is second to them on that. And ESTP is just trying to find their self-worth through having a constant volume of sex, whereas with an ISTP, it's just a thrill for them. It's just a thrill. People are literally just toys to them, to toy with in that situation when they get so debauched because they're trying to like not ever be bored. That melancholy gets in the way, and they just get so depressed and so bored all the time, so they just live for the thrill, right? Gotta live for the thrill, etc. And that's one of their biggest issues. So they have to get to a point where they have to develop their personal responsibility and realizes that their actions has consequences that affect other people, so that they actually see how their actions damages other human beings around them. Usually ISTPs have this selfish point of view of, well, like, hey, as long as it doesn't hurt anyone, it's all good. I can take these drugs, whatever, or as long as, I should be able to hurt myself and not, but the thing is they have to come to the realization that harming themselves actually does harm other people, and they actually do become a burden on other people. So as soon as the ISTP comes to terms with the fact that their NI child actually can create burdens on other people, that could be a serious issue, because then the ISTP is going to be dealing with guilt consistently. And then people are also going to be coming after the ISTP for creating those burdens on other people. And so they decide, okay, yeah, I probably shouldn't do that. I'm not going to do that. I don't want to do that anymore, because their SE parent is waking up and realizing, hey, my personal choices are actually creating burdens for other people, which is going to have some serious consequences for my future. I better stop. As a result, SE parent finally woke up and it's like, okay, yeah, I should be responsible about like the choices that I make so I'm not negatively impacting others. Yeah, probably should figure that out. And then at last, the superego is like, okay, great, Mr. ISTP, you're actually being responsible for one, but you're still arrogant and you're still prideful and you're still like foolish anyway. So definitely still not going to work with you yet. You've got much work to do on your little path to enlightenment here. So then the ISTP moves on, and we got the gateway into the ego working out well. The hero function is fine. We have the parent function getting between the hero and the child to prevent cognitive looping, thank God. And then we have the inferior function. The inferior function is the second gateway, also known as extroverted feeling, also known as social anxiety. This is where social anxiety comes from. ISTPs have serious social anxiety. They're afraid of making people feel bad. They're afraid of feeling guilty, although it's hilarious to me because their inner child constantly gets them into situations where waking up the next day with someone that after having sex with somebody they don't even know, and then they feel super mega guilty for it. On one hand, they wake up and they got one woman on one arm and another woman on the other arm, knowing that they definitely had both those women in this huge party that previous night, but they still feel guilty about it because they realize they're debauched and they just use that person. They don't actually care. Then they start to feel guilty about those kinds of things, which can be a problem. And they end up feeling guilty. And it gets even worse, because people can take advantage of that social anxiety, that fear of making other people feel bad and that guilt, and then guilt ISTPs into doing whatever they want. And that could be a problem. And then the ISTP ends up losing their freedom because they're so socially anxious. That could be a problem that they need to figure out. But the ENFJ subconscious is ultimately one of the keys or one of the pathways with which the ISTP is able to gain mastery, because the ENFJ subconscious is their mentorish side, where they mentor other people so that they can master skills, because by default they're the jack of all trades, master of none, but in order to master skills they have to teach those skills. And when they come to that standpoint, okay, that's super useful. The ENFJ can confer upon a ton of skills to other people and actually create a generation of young people who are a lot more skilled, where the ISTP can literally prove that the arbitrary education affiliative institution is actually worthless. This is why I used to have the apprenticeship programs. You take on an apprentice and you get to a journeyman, then you become a master and you can take on an apprentice. And that entire loop and that entire societal education process, instead of traditional affiliative education, as that way master versus apprentice is a bit more of the pragmatic way, the ISTP can confer upon those people those skills, which also through their ENFJ subconscious causes those people to be loyal to the ISTP. So that even if the ISTP who is not really aware of the consequences of their actions, if they do make a mistake, those people are still going to stick around and be there for the ISTP, because the ISTP is eventually going to screw up, and the ISTP is definitely going to need people there. And those are the people who the ISTP ends up removing burdens from instead of adding burdens onto, because without that SE parent within their ego, they're going to be giving people burdens, whereas with their SE parent developed, they're taking away people's burdens, because that's their personal responsibility. It is the responsibility of the ISTP to remove burdens from other people. It's the same thing with their ENFJ subconscious. They remove burdens through teaching skills. Giving man a fish is not good enough, but if you teach man to fish, he can eat for the rest of his life. And that takes away a burden from that man because he has that skill. The ISTP ego creates the tool with which to go fishing, and then the ENFJ teaches the skill with which to use that tool to go fishing. Do you guys see what I'm saying here? And it's all about removal of burdens. That's one of the biggest purposes in life for the ISTP, other than reaching mastery through mentorship. It's all about removing burdens. The problem is that ISTPs don't even realize that oftentimes they are a burden. And they are a burden because their freedom of choice creates burdens. So they need to be in relationships with people who have super high endurance and perseverance and steadfastness, like SI heroes, and SI parents like SJs, because SJs can basically tolerate the additional burdens that is put upon them by their ISTP lovers. This is consistent all the time. And it's no different like when ENFPs get with ISTPs as well, because ENFPs through SI aspirational can also put up with those additional burdens that the ISTPs putting on them until the ISTP's SE parent is developed, and then instead they're like, okay, yeah, I'll be useful for once and start removing your burdens, right? But then, they don't. And this is one of the things where ISTPs get super hypocritical, because they go out of their way criticizing other people for being burdensome on others, but then they themselves are constantly adding to people's burdens with their poor choices, their irresponsible choices. And then they have this attitude of like, oh, hey, I'm just going to put off my manhood. I'm going to put off my adulthood and like try to push out my youth as long as possible so I can have sex with anybody. I can drink anytime I want. I can do whatever drugs I want. I can, hey, if it feels good, do it kind of thing. And they just get this insane debauched joy, because they're trying to run away from their melancholy, because they think that responsibility is boring, and the responsibility is like, it's literally Peter Pan syndrome. Like the ISTP type, an immature ISTP is literally Peter Pan. Congratulations, you're a loser. Like, it's really annoying. Stop it. How about you actually take personal responsibility for once and become the great teacher you were meant to be? A teacher that confers skills upon others. A teacher who develops tools and methodologies. Like Joe Robinette. Joe Robinette, he's a fantastic ISTP. He has his own show that he created, and he learned survival skills to teach people survival skills, and he is a survival master as a result. He's absolutely fantastic. Again, I watched him survive in a wintry, forested area with only 4 items. He brought 4 items, and he survived. And he did it all by himself. It's pretty easy. He made his own shelter. He started his own fire. All he had was one sleeping bag, one little pot for making himself some water, and he had one hatchet or axe. Basically, it's like between an axe and a hatchet. It's like midway on that. And he had fire steel. That's it. He didn't even have flint or nothing. That's all he had. Those were the only 4 items he had, and he survived with just that. That's fantastic, to be able to have that opportunity and to confer those skills upon other people and basically take off those burdens for other people, because a lot of people are very insecure about what would potentially happen if society would collapse. He just gave all the skills for someone to be able to survive in the wild right there and take care of their basic needs, which was basically heat and water. Potentially you go beyond that. I can't wait till he starts doing content on traps and being able to catch animals or to find sources of food while out in the wild. But for the most part, I think he's got that pretty well handled. But yeah, that's an ISTP living in an integrated life and closer to enlightenment, instead of being that debauched drunkard who's, crying all the time about how much life sucks and how much he hates working for the man, but then is absolutely doing nothing to actually fix it, because he gives up before he starts, because he doesn't know where he starts all the time. But then he's too pig-headed and too stubborn to actually learn and find out. Because oftentimes ISTPs find themselves as this mentor who's responsible for teaching others, but they are unwilling to actually listen to somebody else and learn something new for themselves. They are unwilling to become the student. And that's so horrible. And that's the arrogance of ENFJ subconscious. Because it is a teacher, it is unwilling to become the student. How can it teach somebody unless it becomes a student first? It makes no sense, but it does this all the time. And it's because of that social anxiety. T.I. Hero is so prideful. Hey, I'm really smart. I hope, but is afraid. I hope people value my thoughts. But because I'm not sure if people value my thoughts, I'm not going to bother learning anything more anyway, which creates arrogance. And it's this inner child that was like, well, I don't want to learn this right now. And it's like, yeah, but if you do, you could be like a great teacher. Well, I don't want to right now because I'm not sure people will value it. And I think I want to do this instead. I want to go have fun instead. And like, okay, nice little NI child, go have fun. Sure, go have fun, loser. And it's just so ridiculous. And the ENFJ subconscious is just like not willing to actually, develop. Because they don't want to put themselves in the position of the student. How can you develop tools? How can you teach somebody if you're not willing to be a student? You have to be willing to learn. You have to be willing to be the apprentice. ISTPs, FE inferior is specifically about finding someone who can confer value upon you, who can provide you input. Find someone of high moral fiber, someone who is well researched, someone who can present material to you so that you could take on that material, so you can get thinking about it, and then you could craft tools, and then you could create teaching experiences and give people experiences and teach them those skills based on the tools that you've made. And then you're happy. You'll actually be happy. And then wait a minute, you don't have to worry about that vice of melancholy anymore because you'll be in a constant state of joy forever. So that's it. That's literally the key to happiness right there for ISTPs. You guys want to be happy? Well, guess what? You need to put on your student cap. Go be a student. And I'm not talking about joining a university. Find someone who knows a craft or knows a skill or builds a tool or something and go learn it from them. And then go teach it to somebody after you make the tools or acquire the tools that you need to get the job done. And just go do it. You need to go apprentice under somebody. You will be a lot happier when you're finally teaching somebody and actually mastering the skill. It counts not just for your children, but anyone for that matter. So don't forget, it's absolutely required. You won't get anything done that way. You will not get anywhere in life. You will end up having midlife crisis. And you'll have no idea where all the time went. Absolute, total waste. So, your life will not have meaning if you're not a teacher. So go for it. You will have midlife crisis. If you haven't spent any time teaching and you've been so focused on controlling everybody else with your ESTJ shadow because you're afraid of your freedom, of losing your freedom of choice, maybe you should spend your freedom on learning new skills and developing tools so that you can become a better teacher. Because it's your job, ISTPs, to teach. Mastery through mentorship. Go mentor somebody. It's your responsibility. Because otherwise, if you're controlling everybody else in your life for the sake of your freedom of choice, well, then you're just adding burdens on other people and enslaving others, actually. It's so annoying, especially when ISTPs think it's okay to put surveillance cameras everywhere and just snoop on people working for them that they're managing. Snoop on people within their own family, tracking cell phones all the time, having that surveillance society that they would hate to live under themselves, but then they create within their own life for the sake of keeping freedom. Wow, you overlords. It's so annoying. Slavers. It's just horrible. So ENFJ subconscious, to be able to master FE inferior, you have to focus on being helpful. So learn a skill, but you have to be focused on being helpful. You have to be willing to listen. If you're not willing to listen to another master and take on their skills and potentially help that master as a helper, as an apprentice, because what do apprentices do when they're with their master? They help their master. That's how they learn. They're an assistant. So make yourself an assistant. It's not that hard. The key to ISTP happiness is for an ISTP to be an assistant. Have you guys ever even stopped to think about that? Be an assistant. So FE inferior, become an assistant, become an apprentice, okay? Actually seek out to help people that you can learn from and then learn those skills, develop new tools and innovate what they've done, and then teach it to others and become the master yourself. I promise you, you will have all unlimited joy in your life if you do this. I promise. Okay? You will be happy. And then you won't have to be so debauched, screwing so many hookers and having whatever drugs and wasting all your money at the roulette table like an idiot, and instead actually be responsible and lifting up burdens from other people's lives because you're teaching them valuable skills and making amazing tools that make people's lives better, and you're actually useful for once instead of being like a virus upon the land. Making excuses for your stupid ass behavior at the bar where it's like, well, I have a right to get myself completely drunk and screw any woman I want because I can. Or I have a right, to sleep with another woman's man. Ooh, that's effective. Yeah, great. I'm sure you're doing great teaching those people some real skills. Yeah. Wow, arrogant. Why can't an ISTP humble themselves to the point of apprentice? Why can't they humble themselves to the point of being a student? Why can't they humble themselves to be an assistant? This is all the superego wants from the subconscious, the ENFJ subconscious, where the ENFJ subconscious is willing to become the apprentice, to become the student. okay? Because then that is the first step towards becoming a master. I guarantee you, ISTPs, it'll be the best decision you've ever made. Quit university, quit your life, quit everything, and become the student. To the point where you realize in order to be successful in life that you always have to be a student. You always have to be an apprentice under something. Because while you're a master in certain areas and conferring that knowledge on others, you still are a student in other areas. There's no such thing as arriving. It's a constant state of being a student forever, for the rest of your life, so that you can be a constant mentor for others. This is how you contribute. This is what truly makes you happy. And that's how you master the second gateway, the inferior, or also known as the infant function. And then we have the shadow, aka the unconscious, TE villain. TE villain is so rough, and it's like, it's really frustrating. Like I said earlier, ISTPs can be some of the most controlling of all the types because they have in their head, it's like, hey, my freedom is more important than anyone else's choice. My freedom of choice. I'm the one who makes the best choices here in this family. So I'm going to control the rest of the members of my family or the rest of the members of my group at school or the rest of my coworkers or the people that work under me at work so that I always have freedom of choice. So I'm the one that always gets all the fun privileges. So I'm the one that always gets the joy. So I don't ever have to be melancholy again. And they literally enslave other people and bring burdens to other people instead of protecting other people. See, have you ever noticed ISTPs where they're like, I'm just going to ignore the truth for the sake of controlling others. I'm going to ignore and break every arbitrary rule out there, but as soon as it suits me, I'm going to use those same arbitrary rules against other people to protect my personal freedom. Wow, hypocrites! ISTPs do this all the time. It's so annoying. It's like they also, the ESTJ shadow stunts the growth of other people because if those people would someday become more skillful than the ISTP, that would mean the ISTP is not as useful. Therefore, the ISTP's privileges would be transferred from them to other people. The ISTP NI child is all about giving themselves privileges, giving themselves choices, giving themselves opportunities, and making sure that all of those privileges are them. And then only every now and then will they share a privilege with somebody, you know, that they feel has earned it with their SE parent, right? Only those loyal to me can have a little bit of the privileges that I have. Wow, this is how ISTP, INFP superego gets super entitled with other people. It's so annoying, and that ESTJ shadow is so entitled. Because it's like, hey, it's all about my privileges. It's all about my freedom. So I'm going to control you and use all those arbitrary rules that I hate myself and I break all the time. But I can get away with it because I got NI child luck. But I'm going to use those to enforce the rules so that you can't ever get in the way of my freedom. Wow. Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. I can't stand it when ISTPs do this. You hypocrites. And it's like, and it gets even worse because that TE villain of the ESTJ can cause, through cognitive orbit, the TI hero to completely ignore the truth. They will ignore the truth. They will ignore the facts of the situation. They'll even ignore how other people are being harmed. They will be completely uncaring because, hey, you know, it's either them or it's my freedom. I'm not going to help them because I'm giving up my freedom. Wow. Wow. You realize how foolish that is, right? You realize that it will come back to haunt you, right? But, oh, you're any trickster can't see the consequences of your actions, right? Don't forget, ISTPs, you reap what you sow. If you have definitely gotten where that ESTJ shadow's taskmaster and started whipping people around, forcing people to follow these arbitrary rules that you yourself don't believe in, that you yourself break all the time, that hypocrisy, your guilty conscience, your guilty heart will find you out. And people will realize it, and you will have that reputation. Guess what will happen? All that control, all that enslavement, all of that enforcing of the arbitrary rules, guess what that's going to do? Blowback. It's going to come back and it's going to haunt you. And then all that control that you were exerting to guarantee your personal freedom, guess what's going to happen? You're going to have no freedom. You're going to have all that freedom taken away from you. kind of like that guy who's an ISTP who tried to get out of paying child support, and then he ends up finding himself in a really bad financial situation. His driver's license is taken away, and then he's pulled over one day for drunk driving, a DUI, without a license, and he finds his ass in jail with no money and no hope of getting out anytime soon, forced in Alcoholics Anonymous. And then he had his picture thrown up in the newspaper. No one's going to hire him, and he's basically completely and utterly screwed. All because he was exerting those arbitrary rules on an innocent person for the sake of his own personal freedom. Wow, pathetic. He's not even actually a real man. He's inhuman. Doesn't care. And I thought he was supposed to be a great mentor. I thought he was supposed to actually help somebody for once. But no, he's actually just as selfish as the people that he criticizes for being selfish. Hypocrite. Absolute hypocrite. So that's what can happen with ESTJ shadow. And, my former ISTP boss, he was that way. He was ESTJ shadow focused. He'd put these cameras everywhere in our office. Every time I walk in the data center, he's always watching everything I do. And then all of a sudden he'd start texting me, "What are you doing in the data center?" And I'm like, "I'm doing that thing that you told me to do." And he's like, "I didn't tell you to do that." And at the same time, his SI critic gets all witch-like. And he's trying to tell me about how, "Oh yeah, I remember everything. I have the memory of an elephant," he told me. And I'm like, "Whatever, dude. This is why I instruct people to keep track of everything your ISTP says, so you could throw it their TI hero's face and be like, 'No, on this date and this time, you said this.'" So that's why they're with STJs as their gold and silver pair, or why they're with the philosopher types as their most compatible types to be in relationships with, because those types will literally document everything they say to throw it in the face of the ISTP to be like, "No, actually, you said this." That way the ISTP anti-child can't get out of that obligation, because what's funny about the ESTJ shadow is that in their bid to control everybody else, they end up obligating themselves through the process of controlling everyone else. That's how the blowback works. "Hey, I'm going to control you so that you can never take away my freedom of choice," but because the action of controlling that other person, the action of enslaving that other person at that moment actually ends up creating blowback where they end up having to follow those same rules that they're enforcing. Oh, that sucks. Yeah. See? It's kind of interesting when the ISTP with their ESTJ shadow creates a noose and a gallows meant for another person, then they find themselves hung the next day. Wow. Now that's poetic justice. That's justice. Wouldn't it be wiser if the ESTJ shadow was actually doing its duty and dutifully enforcing proper rules? Or hey, at least, hey, if I'm going to break some of those rules because they are arbitrary, I'm going to allow other people to break them too because I break them all the time. See, eventually my ISTP boss figured that out. He realized that, I do break the rules a lot, and it's okay if my employees under me break the rules too. And you know what that gained him? That gained him respect. That actually gained him loyalty, because he decided to be loyal to us. ISTPs, you want to gain loyalty? You better help people out, and you need to be loyal to them first. And then they will be loyal to you. They'll be die-hard loyal to you. My boss, he didn't start that way, but then when he started to realize the consequences of his actions, when his SE parents started waking up, he realized that it was his duty to make sure that everything was the same and a level playing field. Instead of trying to control us and getting afraid that we were going to take away his freedom, which is ultimately abandoning us, which is ultimately causing us to abandon him, which is ultimately causing us to talk bad about him behind his back. Instead, he realized that that was wrong. And instead, he realized that, you know what, maybe I should focus on making my employees stronger and improve them. And if I don't follow the rules, they don't have to follow the rules. He kept it fair. And once that happened, everyone started respecting him because he didn't think of himself more highly than he ought to. He wasn't entitled with his ESTJ shadow. And then as a result of that, we actually ended up giving him more freedom because we got to enjoy the same privileges he got to enjoy, right? And we ended up protecting his freedom of choice because we always wanted him as an authority figure to have the choice to allow us to break the rules every now and then. You see what I'm saying? You guys see how important that is? But no, ESTJ shadow, ISTP is unaware of the consequences of their actions. they end up creating self-fulfilling prophecies that when they control other people, they themselves will find themselves controlled. Or if they execute another person, hanging them on the gallows, they will find themselves hung. People understand, you want to understand where lynching came from, the concept of lynching came from? It came from an ISTP who eventually found himself lynched. Lynch mobs. Yeah, an ISTP. Okay? Think about that, guys. That's literally how it works. That's where mob mentality can come from, and it comes from ESTJ shadow. If you subject control over other people, you better be way ready to be controlled yourself. Because guess what? You're a mirror, right? ISTPs are a mirror. What you do to others will be done to you. You ever hear the golden rule, do unto others as others do to you, right? Well, guess what? That's a mirror. And guess what? That's your future, ISTPs, if you try to control people for the sake of your own freedom. Instead of controlling them, how about sharing your freedom with them? If you share your freedom with them, if you share your freedom of choice, if you create choices and opportunities for them that you both can do at the same time, because you're interest-based, stop trying to create a win-lose where you're always the winner. Stop being okay with a win-lose situation where you're a winner, where you use the system to benefit you and nobody else. That's not right, because it's you're the winner and everyone else, they will keep track over time because your SE is giving them an experience, and they're going to remember every single time that you got special treatment and they didn't get anything for it. Why are they even loyal to you anyway? They will betray you. I hope they do. I'll watch. I'll cheer them on. I'll have popcorn. I will enjoy it, watching you get dragged to the gallows. And when your feet are hanging there, lifeless, I will smile. Okay? Because justice is served, right? If you don't want that justice to be served upon you, then I suggest you actually be loyal to the people underneath you. You be loyal to your family. You be loyal to your wife and don't have two hookers and snort cocaine off their butts. How about that? That might be nice. How about you're loyal to people that you don't even know, right? That you do not allow yourself to sleep with their lovers and literally cause problems. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, ISTPs. You will literally create for your inner child new obstacles for yourself. You ever hear of the terminology to get out of your own way? There's a reason for that. It's because your ESTJ shadow is in your way. Guys, recognize that you need to stop worrying about the rules taking away your freedom. You got to stop worrying about other people taking away your freedom. You have to allow people to make mistakes. You have to allow people to break the rules. It's okay. If you get freedom of choice, they get freedom of choice. That's what your any trickster needs to realize. It's okay to give other people choices. It's okay because you have choices too. Let them have that freedom too, because if you don't let freedom ring, and it's interesting how your polar opposite, the ENFJ, is Martin Luther King, and he can give that speech about let freedom ring. If you're not going to let freedom ring, I guarantee you MLK is going to come for you. Oh yeah. And he will do it very public. And you will deserve it. And you will know what's wrong. And you know what's coming, right? That's pretty crazy. You got to watch out for that. But I mean, hey, you don't care, right? FI Demon, you don't care. You need to allow, if you break the rules, you need to allow other people to make mistakes. Don't just go in there and interrupt other people and try to finish it for them. You have to let them fail and let them come to you to ask you for help, and then you help them. Do not promote yourself as this arrogant authority figure. Be like, I know more about this than you are. You have to allow them to invite you to teach them, while simultaneously you need to be okay with them making mistakes. As long as it doesn't affect you. If it does affect you, definitely intervene, but still let them make the mistake first, then offer them to fix, and then tell them about the consequences of their actions. Don't you have SE parent? Isn't that what you're supposed to do? Tell other people how their actions are negatively affecting you or will negatively affect you. Explain. Take the time to explain, and instead of just saying directly, no, stop. and being, stop trying to be all explicit, because I get that you're triple direct, but actually like be implicit sometimes. Explain yourself to these people. Explain. Take the time to actually explain. I know it sucks that not everyone in the world is as intelligent as you are, but guess what? They're not your playthings. They're not your toys. You need to be open to the idea of allowing them to be their own human beings. All right? So to master the third gateway, all you have to do is, you have to listen to other people. You have to allow them to break the rules if you are going to break the rules. You have to allow them to have freedom of choice to do so. As a result of this, you'll become wisely loyal to the right people in your life, and you'll be wisely willing to endure hardship for the sake of others, to the point where you are willing to potentially sacrifice a small amount of your freedom for other people's benefit, because you become devoted to creating a win-win. That you will never be satisfied with a win-lose. A win-lose meaning not you getting the lose. A win-lose meaning you're the one getting the win and someone else gets the lose. To the point where you always feel guilty for creating win-lose situations where you're the winner. Like every time you wake up in the morning next to a woman after a one-night stand and you just leave. Yeah, that's a win-lose. Lose for her, win for you, right? What are you even doing? Wake up. I thought you're better than that. Life is not about the blows you can land. Life is about the hits you can take. That's what your SI critic needs to learn. You want to get wisdom out there? You need to be loyal to the right people. You need to be loyal to the right things. You need to be willing to endure hardship by giving a small amount of your freedom to other people so that they can have a freedom of choice too. So that you, instead of enslaving them, are actually freeing them. Freeing them from improper thinking. Freeing them from arbitrary rules. Freeing them from bullshit laws, right? Freeing them and exposing the corruption of the people who create those bad rules or those bad laws, and be willing to do it, not being a coward. That would be nice. Stop being a coward and instead take responsibility. You're all getting in everyone's face about being irresponsible, but where the hell is your sense of responsibility, you hypocrite? Wake up. This is what you need to do to reach enlightenment, so that you gain wisdom in this area, so that you are wisely freeing other people instead of foolishly enslaving them. You're removing their burdens, freeing them from the arbitrary, and giving them a future and a hope, conferring upon them skills and tools to become better human beings. You are supposed to be contributing them. And that's exactly what my ISTP cousin did to me. And it's exactly why I'm here talking to you now. This is me giving back to you because he gave to me. The final gateway is FI demon. That whole thing where you just decide to not care about anyone. Which well, why should I care? Like, why do I want to care about this person? I don't want to care, so I don't have to, And they're not loyal to me. Why do I care? It's a serious problem. And oftentimes ISTPs are accused of being like these soulless people because, it's like I don't feel that way. And some of the reasons why is like when an ISTP figures out that they're a victim of a win-lose situation and they're the lose, and they realize that they were guilted and manipulated in a situation, their FI demon will come out and be like, fine, I'm just going to do whatever I feel like. You're going to end up making the rules, right? You make the rules. It's kind of like when an SJ wife to an ISTP man is like, she makes up this arbitrary rule of some kind, or she ends up being a hypocrite herself, and then he just mirrors her, and it's like, wow, okay, nice little moral failure there. See that you're disloyal to me. Well, then I'm going to go be disloyal to you. I'm going to go have a moral failure of myself, okay? So because you thought it was okay to hang out with that guy, at your work and potentially, have sex with them on a trip, well, then guess what? I'm going to go down to Vegas and I'm going to have two twins and snort some coke right off their ass. You see what I'm saying? Like, that's what happens. FI demon don't care. It's like, wow. FE infant's like, wow, you obviously don't care about me, so and you're not making me a priority, so I am definitely not making you a priority. I'm going to make myself a priority. So, hey, and the ISTPs already have an opportunity to be so debauched anyway and deal with drugs and sex and alcohol and all these fun things because joy, right? joy in their life, and they get so melancholy when you betray them or when you have a moral failure. So guess what? They're going to go automatically have a moral failure of their own. Great. And that's obviously going to make the world better, because guess what? An eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. Imagine how controlling they're going to get too, because they're definitely going to control the situation and be like, hey, you make the rules, you know? You think it's okay to have a moral failure? Great. Obviously, I'm not a priority. So guess what? I'm going to make myself a priority, because you, my wife, are not going to make me a priority. You, my husband, are going to not make me a priority. You went and screwed one of your secretaries at work? Great. I'm going to find some guy that's remotely interesting to me at the bar, and we're going to have a great night tonight, because that's what you get. Oh, I built this house for you, but apparently you don't care. I'm going to burn it down. And then you don't get a house anymore. I did it all for you, but obviously you don't care. You're not loyal. Nice little moral failure. Okay, bye. Burn it all down to the ground. Who can blame them, right? Sometimes that FI demon can lead them into this insanely debauched behavior regardless of a moral failure being around others. And that's because when they're so focused on extending their boyhood out or their womanhood or their youth out, and they have Peter Pan syndrome regardless of their gender, right? That could be an issue, okay? So then they have to get over that FI demon. How do they do that? Well, they need to surround themselves with people with high moral fiber, for one, so they can mirror them and have moral fiber themselves. It's super important to ISTPs. And, just like the SI critic provides wisdom, and the NI willpower of ENFJ subconscious, provides humility for them to be willing to humble themselves to the level of apprentice. And then the SE parent of the ISTP ego is providing personal responsibility. They have an opportunity to master what is possible, because they already are masters of what is by this point in their life. But how do they become a master of what's possible? To the point where they're able to take risks in such a precise way that they're able to actually stumble upon hidden meanings and hidden truths and hidden ways of doing things that were never thought before of, where they could actually create entirely new technologies, because it's like, hey, I just figured out how gravity works, or I just figured out how warp drive works, or I figured out how the Epstein drive works, or or I was able to improve the fuel efficiency, because ISTPs, they're not really aware of what's possible what's possible, and then they discover it easily after mastering these skills, gaining mastery through mentorship, humbling themselves to the level of apprentice so they keep learning, so they can keep mentoring, and then also making sure that they're there and loyal to the right people and loyal to those around them, always deathly loyal to those around them, and being willing to sacrifice their own freedom for the sake of others, such that at that point they realize, hey, it is my moral responsibility to really figure out what's possible. I've done all this, so what else is there? And then they start to discover what else is there. And then the ISTP becomes an explorer of the unreal, the explorer of the unknown, such that then they're able to create a high level of principles that can really change society forever. Think about it. What's a good example of an ISTP? In fiction, there is Zefram Cochrane. Do you know what he did? He invented warp drive in the Star Trek universe. He invented warp drive. He's an ISTP, stumbling upon warp drive, making these amazing discoveries. Or a new form of unlimited energy, right? Or improving fuel efficiency for spaceflight, or there's so many different possibilities out there that the ISTP could discover just as a result of their knowledge and mastery of reality itself. Because if they understand reality completely, guess what? The other side of the coin is what is unreal. If they understand all the kinetic energy in the universe, then that means they can automatically, logically speaking, understand the other side, which is what is all the potential energy in the universe. And that's what their INFP superego is all about, such that it can actually discover amazing things through the principles that they have developed within their lives that can actually fundamentally change the entire future of the human race forever, and ultimately lead to technologies or new ways of doing things, or new skills that could be discovered, new tools that could be discovered that could eventually cause mankind to get closer and closer and closer to utopia, closer and closer to a better world, closer and closer to principles that can change everything. All as a result of being integrated, all as a result of reaching enlightenment, such that they become the ultimate voice and the ultimate opinion that can change the hearts of men forever and ever, and fundamentally change thinking and history forever and ever. Here's a great example. The pyramids. The pyramids, as a structure, putting up, and they last forever. It's like the great work. It's the magnum opus. That's what INFP superego does for the ISTP. It is the magnum opus. It is the pyramids at Giza that have lasted generation after generation for thousands upon thousands of years. Imagine what warp drive would do for humanity if you think about it, right? What would that really do for humanity? That itself would change absolutely everything, right? It would, as much as the Epstein drive did for what is that book? The book is Leviathan Wakes, for example, and I think it's Solomon Epstein just made an engine more fuel efficient to increase the abilities people's for runtime or operating time for spaceflight, etc. Things like that, innovations like that. That's what can come from INFP superego in its angelic form. Otherwise, it'll just be a demon, and instead of, it would spend all of that on itself and then selfishly and enjoy the pleasures of life as is, instead of actually developing and innovating something for everyone's collective future, like some huge feat of engineering. How many mechanical engineers out there do we know that are INFPs that are super amazingly successful, coming up with some insane designs? Like, INFP superego is why we have like these bridges that still stand after hundreds of years, right? Like, that's why, because what an INFP superego is able to come up with in its angelic form is built to last and built to effectively improve humanity indefinitely, where that ISTP would be remembered forever because they made their mark, right? That's the power of FI Angel through INFP superego in its angelic form, instead of using everything they know for their own sensual desires and pleasures, basically. See, that's the difference. That's what it's all about. And that, folks, is what the ISTP artificer looks like as a result of reaching cognitive integration and ultimately enlightenment. If you found this lecture useful, helpful, educational, and or enlightening, thank you for being a patron, because you don't have to subscribe, but I hope that you continue to remain a Patreon subscriber. Thank you all for being here. It's been a wild month, January 2020, and I look forward to seeing you guys next month for the INTJ and INFJ, and hopefully the ISFJ lecture for next month as well. So with that being said, folks, I'll see you guys then. Have a good night.